Welcome to another episode of Talk On Tap. In the last episode, I managed to talk to Luke McCarthy from Bature Brewery, based in Lagos, Nigeria, where we spoke a bit more about the culture of beer and how a small craft brewery made such an indent into Lagos, Nigeria. Of course, that article was called 200 Million People and One Craft Brewery. But today, I have somebody that I've always admired, Craig Claassen, with me, the editor of the Autumn 2025 On Tap magazine. So, Craig, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
You've been here before?
Yes, nice
Yes.
to be here again.
And of course, today I want to chat a bit more about the next or the current edition of On Tap magazine.
Yes.
And your role as the editor. So tell us a bit more about how did you get this job and what makes you the guy chosen to edit this edition?
Sure. Well, I mean, we're co-editors, Joy and myself.
Yeah.
So we work intermittently on, we take ownership of one edition in between.
Okay.
2 editions a year, and then in between we're trying to make it a bit tighter, so it's a bit more, we're working more on each other's editions.
Yeah.
I mean, but I originally started just doing the beer tourism side, the beer route section, the L Trail. And then, it's just almost 2 years ago now. I think it was the first
Time flies, eh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I count them in editions. But
Yeah.
a few editions back.
That's fantastic. So we talk about, of course, if you see the cover of it, you'll know where this conversation is going to go. Clearly. I admitted you just got into, when you saw this, you were like, oh yes, I cannot wait to go through this edition. Huh?
Yes, well, it's certainly familiar faces on the cover, which makes it more accessible for the general beer consumer, which is what we're trying to achieve.
Fantastic. So, of course, we go through the magazine. I did some research on the magazine as well. Not research, but in the sense of I read through it before you and I came to sit down. I could present the shoot. But in your editorial, you spoke about aspects of where you're aiming to clarify the South African beer scene, right? Compared to locally and globally, of course, looking at how South Africa compares to the rest of the world. I just wanted to know, I'm putting you on the spot now, but I wanted to know, like, what did you mean by that in your editorial that is?
Yeah, I think when you look and when you focus on things, it's very much like looking through a kaleidoscope. I mean, the whole world has got very similar problems to us. They've got different solutions to us, and sometimes we feel that in South Africa, because we're at the tip of Africa, we've got to figure these things out from scratch.
Yeah.
The reality is there's lots of context for us. So what we try to do with the content is always try to bring a little bit of a story from overseas. We've got the Moldova story in there, which is the World of Beer section, written by Rachel Cook, which talks a little bit about the challenges that they've got over there, but also, how they overcome it. A few editions back, or a few years back, we had like an edition where we had the Palestinian brewers and talking about specifically getting ingredients that far out.
Yeah.
So it's for me, it's very interesting to put the context to South African beer, or put it in context with the rest of the world, because we're certainly not. We're very exceptional. We've got the Springboks, but we're not an exceptional nation in the sense that we have problems that other people don't have.
Okay.
We just have to overcome the regulation generally.
Okay. Fantastic. And then, of course, as we went through the magazine, something caught my eye, right? There was what do they call it? A graphic, shall I say?
Yes.
Where you spoke about
Infograph,
infograph, yes. Where you spoke about the economic footprint that beer has made in South Africa. And we won't discuss the numbers, but maybe you can discuss it, because you were saying that there's also new surveys that are being done currently, or new ones that will be coming out, about how beer has affected the economy of South Africa.
Yeah, it's a massive employer, and it has the potential to generate quite a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
At one point, the multiplier for the amount of jobs that it created was similar to mining before the pandemic, and a few things changed obviously over that time. We found that with stringent regulation, generally it tends to stifle the industry a little bit. But equally, I mean, it's a massive amount of potential that's sitting there for employment, because it's Bob Pease, when I spoke to him about from the Brewers Association, has the saying that it's a willfully inefficient industry and we throw humans at the problem. So we employ people to do things as
Yeah.
opposed to employing machinery,
Yes.
especially in craft. So it takes quite a lot of people to actually produce 2,000 liters of beer.
Yeah.
And because of that, it has a lot of potential. And I think the graphic kind of just speaks to the size of the industry. I think we're about 10th in the world. I think,
Yeah.
well, the last survey that was done from a consumable of beer or consumers of beer in the world, which is big.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're 10th in the world of anything, I mean, if Bafana was sitting there, we'd be feeling very confident.
We were quite chuffed with ourselves, yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
But that's because the numbers, you will see it in this edition, the numbers are quite eye-watering. And like we spoke before we started this discussion, was like, I can't believe those numbers. I mean, we're talking billions, talking about hundreds of thousands of jobs that's directly or indirectly linked into the beer industry.
It goes from malting, it goes from the hospitality industry.
Yeah.
It's the hop producing,
Yes.
because we are one of the few nations that actually produce hops, especially this far south.
Yeah.
So it's definitely got potential, and with a little bit better regulation, we could really explode the industry and create jobs, which is what it's all about in South Africa.
I'm looking forward to that. But of course, Craig, we are here for the feature article that you wrote.
Yes.
And we've been talking about this for some time now, how excited you were to meet literally World Cup winning rugby players that are now involved in beer.
Yes.
So tell us a bit more about the Bomb Squad article, the feature article that you wrote with Stephen Kitshoff and Malcolm Marx. Because when I read the story, I was like, I can't believe that 2 rugby players are involved in beer like this now, and where they thought was just a little novel idea to where it has grown to now. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's interesting to me because there's a lot to the story that I didn't have enough pages really to write.
I was surprised as well. I was like, maybe you could have written a little bit more.
Well, I mean, the basic idea here is that these guys are, firstly, they're looking at the future.
Yeah.
As sportsmen, they're looking at what happens after rugby. And as they were roommates and throughout the touring, they became good friends. And both of them have the shared interest of, well, drinking beer and enjoying beer. From what the conversation I heard, they don't drink nearly as much as the guys in the craft industry, but they've
got a lot to learn there. Maybe we World Cup winners.
but really, with retirement pending, that might change.
Yeah.
So obviously, at the time of conversation, Stephen Kitshoff was still kind of not 100% sure whether he was going to come back or what the injury recovery time was going to be. So he was still looking towards the future of actually playing a few more years. But obviously, by the time we got to publishing, because we did that, it was quite a big lead time to get everybody together. That changed slightly. But their story, for me, is actually the deeper dive. Is that if we've got a product like Bomb Squad that is accessible to the general public, it's something that breaks down the barrier between craft beer is this and commercial beer is that, and actually going that craft and commercial, it's really just a case of styles and what's the bulk style. So you look at the SABs and the Heinekens, they're producing lagers as the bulk of what they're doing, not necessarily all they're doing. Whereas what they've done is they've taken the Lafroig Castle Light and they've gone, well, we want to have, Malcolm was quite adamant that what they wanted was something that was lighter in carbonation, so if they could have more of it without filling up so quickly. So
who's complaining about that?
I mean, that weirdly enough is the entire craft beer industry. We're making ales and all of that. So then they've got the Pilsner as well, which is slightly more bitter and slightly higher in alcohol. So there's the 2 elements that are actually quite well-known styles in South Africa already. We've got styles similar to that by the commercial guys. I won't name drop just now, but but when we
just now, but not now either.
I'm just scared to let somebody out. But when you then look at the craft guys, this is manufactured by Saggy Stone, so it's manufactured with the craft spirit, the craft at heart, and if they are successful by actually promoting this, it promotes it to a much wider audience, which then makes
the crowd,
it becomes like a pivot in the middle that makes you go, okay, well, I've liked that Pilsner, and here's another brewery doing the Pilsner. All of those things are important at this point, where the South African craft beer industry is, where we're struggling with regulation. It makes it slightly easier to open the conversations with government. About this is it's a
nation. It's like a nation builder, shall I say, because.
It
represented,
it crosses over into all South Africans, and I think that's really what we're trying to get to. Is it's beer generally is for South Africans, But this was quite fun because obviously I got to speak to a couple of champions and listen to their insight into, the fact that they're planning ahead. Is interesting. It wasn't. They also played around with other jobs or other things that they could be doing. But Kitshoff sort of said, like when he grew up in Gordons Bay.
He said his pops was also part of the liquor board, so
yeah,
he always understood the industry somewhat.
Within the industry, and he grew up with a visual awareness of alcohol brands and had always wanted to have an alcohol brand. And when Fokov Politica went and started this, he thought that's a cool idea. That's what I wanted to do, and that is essentially what they settled on, which is nice to see that that craft has actually created the environment where people want to be part of it. Now the question,
I thought of it that way actually.
Yeah, well,
there's an appeal to it. Yeah,
it's cool, and at the end of the day, it is small businesses that are making products for a reason. They're making it with a purpose. It's not just to create beer; it's to create the experience. And that's what I like about actually chatting to them, is that they see it that way as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. But I'm going to stop you there.
Yes.
In the article, don't mention what we talk about, but there's plans afoot.
Yes.
For them to produce something else as well.
Yes. Well,
I don't know. It's
that's
for you to mention, not for me.
But talk to you about you might have to edit some of these things. No, but I mean, obviously, with a business that develops like this, they would be looking at expanding their range, where it's more than just the beer, and there's other elements. You can already see it on their website. They've got some apparel and things like that. So you'll see what they come up with. But at the end of the day, I can actually see where their business can go quite solidly within beer and the peripheries, and it can be a template for the rest of craft breweries to actually see, well, this works. It's very public and.
But can I ask you this question? Now, I hear what you're saying, right? With regards to that, this is just my own personal perspective. It sounds so wrong of me, but because of who they are, they can achieve these goals. Do you think any man in the street could achieve what they've achieved?
Well, I think it is. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to marketing. What they've got is they've got two fantastic ambassadors for the brand, because they're very well known. Anybody could, in theory, have an ambassador for a brand, and it's it might be a cost outlay for a craft brewery starting. But I mean, we've had this discussion. But in South Africa, there's not many breweries with any sort of marketing budget, and that's things that has to happen.
Yes.
So will have to happen. So if you look at this, yes, maybe they have like a leg up, but they don't own their own brewery. So somebody that owns their own brewery and their licensing, they might find.
So technically, they are ambassadors to their own brand.
So they've got the other side.
Yeah.
So there's the one half and the other half, and when you put the two together, it works.
Okay.
And perhaps as I said, the industry can learn something about what works, what doesn't work, and.
Clearly, this is working then.
Yeah, and I mean the concept that they've got is, I think it was Ulster's played Wolfpack in the UK that had the similar sort of thing, but they were still playing. They had, I think, beer tents or beer, what would you call it, like a caravan outside games the last 2 seasons that they were playing. And that developed into an interesting business as well.
Jeez, that's fantastic. It's mind blowing to hear that I would have never thought that two Springboks would be going into the field of beer. A lot of these big rugby players are going into the liqueurs, the cognacs, the tequilas, those type of things.
When you look at Ryan Reynolds with Wrexham, I think they bought the lager as well.
Yeah.
It's an old brewery, but it's probably one of the oldest lagers in the UK.
But he was involved in gin.
But he was involved in gin, and then you look at Bryan Cranston and Aaron Ball from Breaking Bad. They were involved with some sort of mosquito tequila. So there is legs in it, and the ambassador actually makes quite an important.
Actually, you mentioned that another famous person is Spider-Man, Tom Holland.
Oh, does he own something as well?
No, he has. He started his own 0% beer. He's full on 0% beers. Yeah, the whole range that he started,
which is also interesting.
Zero, something like that. But also, in this conversation now, I realize what you're mentioning now is the fact that you bring star power to a brewery.
Yeah,
and
because the product's good.
It could work if the product is good.
And craft beer, the product generally is good, and it's a wide range. And it's narrow focus to some extent because it's what their personal preferences are, which is the Castle light sort of idea. So they've gone for a beer that's lighter in alcohol, lighter in body, but also a little bit lighter in carbonation.
So are you guys friends now?
Well, I mean, we're acquaintances. I think that's right.
Springbok season is starting soon. I'm just saying.
I wouldn't want to subject him to my friendship.
Oh, they can come have a beer here. I don't have a problem with that. But yeah, I think that was such a fantastic little story about the bomb squad and how the story started and where it's going to.
Yeah,
I'm properly fascinated by that, and definitely worth a read.
and it's in its infancy to some extent.
Yeah.
With Kitshoff now semi-retired, I think he's still very much involved with rugby. There will be a momentum in place.
He does mention that when he was recovering, also that
Yeah,
he actually got down to sit down and do the business of beer.
yeah, it's
And-
a lovely business to be involved.
See me complaining. Then after the feature of Bomb Squad, there was another story about what's stirring in the world of beer.
Yes.
And it tickled me, like there are amazing things that's happening, what breweries are up to, what leaders are up to. So can we delve a little bit more into what's stirring in the world of beer?
Yes, well,
Fascinating feature, by the way.
yeah, well,
Yeah.
it's Kamini Dickey and Peter Hayden, legendary
Mhm.
contributors to the magazine as well. What is interesting to me, I think the big development in beer at the moment is the non-alcoholic.
Yeah.
I mean, Athletic is a massive company, and it
There's a
only goes.
brewery in Cape Town that's also coming out now very
There's-
soon.
there-
Milk Brew.
There's a whole bunch of developments because the technology's gotten cheaper,
Mhm.
and the understanding of how to get the mouthfeel right.
Mm-hmm.
I mind you, the Germans have been doing it for years, and monasteries and things. They've figured out how to get the
There's one year.
how to get they figured out how to get
Yeah.
the different mouthfeels and things right. But that's the most complicated thing. The lighter you go in alcohol to get the mouthfeel right is quite difficult. So Athletic has been interesting, but then there's the drawbacks of some people actually. I don't know if we can admit this, but some people drink for a little bit of a buzz, and some people do, some people don't. Some
Of
people
course,
drink for the
within
variety and they don't like the
responsibilities,
buzz.
of course. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's many different reasons why people plug into it. So with flavour, Athletic really focuses on things like getting the
And Athletic is based where?
in America, North
Yeah.
America, I think Seattle, East Coast. So you've got that trying to bring the whole craft offering, which is hoppy beers, mouthfeel of like that pillowy mouthfeel that you get with a nice napa and things like that. That's what they're trying to achieve. You got like you said, Nick in the UK. I think that's a big one at the moment, selling quite well. All for that. But then there's also products being developed to say, well, I mean, you don't want the hangovers, you don't want the alcohol, you want to be able to drink beer for, like the whole night, New Year's Eve, go home sober, no problems. But you do want to feel a bit of a buzz, and then there's products being developed to actually add to those additives. That's still in human trials, and whether that takes off.
Oh, make it sound like human trials.
Human trials. I mean, we're going to see if it's
Exactly
safe.
tested in the rats, but yeah.
if it's safe, safe to actually consume that, and because at the end of the day, that's all it is. So it's interesting. It's an interesting development. I'm still a purist. I'd rather drink less and enjoy every sip of it. But Athletic actually has got me interested because of the fact that they've got the mouthfeel right and they've got the variety.
Which has always been a problem, is that mouthfeel.
Yeah.
It doesn't satisfy a thirsty beer drinker. Besides the buzz, it's that mouthfeel, the aromas.
It's getting, you must remember, I mean, what the bitterness buzz and things like, and you're getting sugars when you're actually making alcoholic beers, whereas you're getting less of those sugars because you want to ferment less.
Yeah.
So you actually have a massive malt bill and very little fermentable to get that right, which is wasteful in some ways, or you take the alcohol afterwards and things. So
But also in the magazine, you can make rusks.
yes.
Just so by the way, there's a recipe for rusks too. It's been great.
Side business. Yeah, I mean that.
I'm going to try it, by the way.
Yeah. So the thing is, with this, you've also got. I mean, within that article, they also talk about the hybrid beer. So you got the beer and the wine mixes, which for me was intriguing because, I like the idea.
There's not much of it in South Africa, eh?
There's
Where
not
we
much.
got the hybrid.
It's more Belgian in some senses, and it's at the moment it is. But it only takes one to take off. I mean, somebody puts it with a pinotage, it might be fantastic. There was something like that. Red Sky did that years ago.
Yeah.
Which I think they made for Bayer's Kloof, the inventors of the pinotage style or wine, or grape, cultivar, so to speak. So it is interesting. It might come back. I really like the fact that they're blending it with Pinot Noirs. It's one of my favourite wines. So it makes sense. Makes sense to me.
So you can't just
to blend a beautiful ale with a beautiful wine.
No, but that's
Can only be
fantastic to
good.
see that there's no stagnation in beer, is what I'm getting at.
No.
There's always somebody pushing the envelope, making non-alcoholic beers taste a lot better, have that
Yeah.
appeal. I think hybrid is something that I would love to actually do a little bit more research into.
There is a
Yeah?
style in the BJCP manuals as well, which has been around for ages, which is the Italian grape beer,
Yeah.
or grape ale, which is, I think it's 25 or 35% Italian grapes, but it's become all grapes now.
Yeah.
But something that happens with all of these, sometimes styles get invented
Mhm.
and they don't last, but styles that naturally occur
Yeah.
because of demand, because of what the flavor is that people are looking for. Like IPAs getting hoppier and hoppier, but flavor more than the
Yeah.
bitterness. I mean, in the 90s was very bitter. Now it's come back to not being so bitter again, but we've got all of those oils and stuff. So
But it'll always be that ebb and flow that you always have that.
palates change and people push boundaries and new technology becomes available. So what's nice about it is that it's constantly going to develop. Some of it's going to become something new.
Yeah.
And some of it's going to go through a little stage of being and then disappear. And we're going to look back at it fondly and go, that was okay.
Oh, I remember that.
I remember that. You remember that brand? Yeah, they didn't last. It was crazy years.
Which is another. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So now we go onto another feature that was written for the autumn edition. And I just want to make my apologies now before we start this conversation.
What did you do?
I did a review the other day.
That sounds good.
Yes, and I mentioned the wrong brewery.
Oops.
So this is a special apology to brew hogs. I apologize for mentioning the wrong name. But we're going to talk about brew hogs now.
Yes.
Where there's an article where you talk about the history of the brewery. And I never knew this until I read this article in this magazine. So tell us a little bit more about how the story about brew hogs.
Well,
Brew hogs. Brew hogs.
brew hogs. You said brew hogs.
Brew hogs.
So I mean, it's an interesting. It's really a snapshot of craft beer and this undefined thing of what craft is in South
Yeah.
Africa. So I think it's 1984 or somewhere around those. 1984, 1985. They commissioned a brewery for Gold Reef City in Joburg. I remember as a kid we used to go there. I can't remember drinking the beer. I was probably too young. I would have. But I mean, the brewery, obviously, this was owned by SAB, and there was a lot of. I mean, there was research and development. I mean, SAB's actually always been doing research and development. They still have small facilities, and I think Heineken's got a couple of small ones that's popped up now as well that they're doing research and development in. But obviously things change, trends changed, 1994 happened, so there was a 10, 12 year sort of development of stages in South Africa, and the brewery there was closed down, and then this brewing system kind of went into storage. And then one day the storage opened up magically, and brew hogs, when they started it, they managed to get all of the original like cupboards and documents, recipes and brew sheets, and so a lot of history actually came out with it, pictures.
I even saw that they did the schematics and found out how the tanks were built
and how to put them together.
Yeah.
So it's working on train systems. I mean, it comes from really the home of exported beer in the UK to where we are in South Africa. To when they commissioned it, there was obviously not a lot of money spared to get the best type of system that you can go small, but always with the long-term vision of being able to scale it up.
Yeah.
Because that's why you would spend that money on R&D. So then now where they are with Brewers, it means that they've got a fantastic facility. One of the
probably 3,000 litre system now.
It's not just the size; it's also the way that it flows.
Yeah, they mentioned the stages as well. How you can do different beers now, different styles.
And it's a beautiful system as well.
Yeah.
It's got the wooden cladding and all of that, so it actually looks wonderful.
And that makes me feel even worse now when we talk about this article that I did them an injustice.
You have to go down there.
I have to go to Kyalami.
Have a strafdop, as they say.
A few.
Or a few. It's a beautiful facility as well, and a very, very knowledgeable brewer who wrote the article for us. So it's just a nice story because it shows you the continuity of the South African. We all think it just happened.
Funnily enough, it is
we just had like a craft beer explosion that sort of happened in the like noughties. And and even the can size.
Yes.
There's a story behind why they've got those can sizes, and that's a story that you should learn on the tour when you go there.
I'll make it up, Brewers. Don't worry. I'll make it up. But yeah, fantastic. And then but the history behind that, I think the way they set up looks as well in the magazine, in the article at least. It's definitely a place that I want to go and visit. and the history behind it is just fascinating. And
I must say, I had time for, like I was flying somewhere and
Yeah.
last year after boot camp, and I had half a day to kill, and I drove all the way there, and then I drove back to the airport just because.
you were happy.
I
The
was
best decision you made on that day.
That was the best. That's the best way to start your holiday. I think is going to
Yeah, no, I can't disagree with you on that. No ways. And then we go on to another article that, of course, the magazine is full with amazing other stories as well.
Yes.
The home brewing recipes that are there. There's the mash out. There's so many little aspects of the magazine that gives you a lot of knowledge. If a person that has no knowledge about beer, but also wants to learn a bit more about beer, I think the On Tap magazine is the one to go to. So Craig, also in the magazine, we also have aspects where you talk about malts. People have a wrong perception of how many types of malts, or the variety is amazing.
Yes.
But also we talk about what the magic is with regards to malts.
Yeah, look, I mean, we've got good facilities in South Africa. It's SAB that does a lot of that with the craft guys. We've got Marina that wrote the article, actually heavily involved with it.
Yeah.
She was, I think, the general manager at Waltz Malting,
Yeah.
which was like a craft maltster. But you get two types. You get your power malts, your base malts, as we call it, and you get your special malts. And your specialty malts, and what this is all about is just how they manufacture from one raw ingredient.
Yeah.
Well, two raw ingredients, because they use a lot of wheat as well.
Yes, the varieties.
Is how to get the varieties and what that means. Styles really develop based on what your availability of ingredients are. If you look at your decoction mashing, it's a big thing at the moment. It's where you take under-modified malts and you boil some of it. You just try to get it a bit more modified.
Yeah.
Modified means the amount of sugars that it can release in and you chuck it back in. But it also was for step mashing, so it would allow you to, you're boiling malts, putting it back in, raising the temperature. And that then developed into beers like the Pilsner Urquell, like the Czech Premium Pale lager soup, which has a particular type of flavor and a type of, they call it Maillard, which is your, when sugar starts to cook or caramelize, or whatever it might be, you get it on almost everything. So you look at that aspects of it, and then you go, well, there's specialty malt that's got some of that in it already. So some of the modern styles would use a Munich malt or a crystal malt that will give you that. So back in the day, the IPAs, to balance that excessive bitterness, we put a lot of crystal in and Munich malts in to try to get the sugar balance up. So when you've got a lot of bitterness, you've got something sweet that it's sitting on, and that's part of the beauty of it is what goes into my beer. A lager is crisp, as little as possible. The moment you go into the ales, it's got more things because it's got to balance out more hops and bitterness.
But that's a fantastic little story. Not little story, it's actually quite in depth about malts. But then, of course, the very next article is about hops.
Well, it's autumn, isn't
and
it?
about wet hops. And I had an experience at Acre Project the other day. They get their own hops. They've got licenses in Houtpay to do their thing. But I had their hop beer. Man.
It brings biotransformation.
It didn't touch sides. It was that good. Because it was fresh hops that
it brings a softness to the actual hops.
Yeah.
Where when you basically when you have dried hops, it's gone through a process where some of the volatiles have been lost.
Yeah.
So when you go from green into the fermenter, you get all of it. And the quicker you do it, the more you get.
Yeah.
I mean, if you leave it on a table, you get some of the oils that come off it as it dries. So the idea is to keep it as
you get maximum hoppage.
The green hopping, green hopping to chuck it in there. So we've got in the magazine, we've got two articles on that. The one is how to grow it at home, because a lot of us, I've got a little orchard of things that are growing there.
You still owe me hops, by the way.
Yes, I do.
Anyway,
but there's a few of them like growing. I've got a variety going now, and what sort of like feed. Because for me, the big challenge always is what do I put on this to make the maximum yield?
Yeah.
In the Cape, that's not necessarily suited for. It's not really suited necessarily because it's got a lot of wind. The wind breaks the leaves. It makes less flowers and more greenage, if you could put it like that. But then on the other side, when you do manage to do it, if you look at a place like Solberg that grows it, I mean, you walk into their facility and it's surrounded.
It's a partitioning.
It smells like an IPA sometimes when it's in
yes.
And
the other day,
exactly. And how do you use it? Because one thing that you need from your hops is bitterness.
Yeah.
And to know what bitterness is, you need to know what the alpha acid is. And if you don't know what the alpha is, you've no idea. So then, if you play around with your brewing, that
Yeah.
you only go into the safe zones, that you're only releasing the betas, or mostly releasing the betas. So you're not getting the bitterness so much, but you're getting the orange, the citrus, the like dankiness, whatever you might want to get out of the hop. That's how you brew with it. And what we got Nick from Solper actually to tell us about how you would approach it to ensure that you've got a drinkable beer that's not terribly bitter, because one year we had a lot of alphas, for argument's sake, and the next year there's less. So that you can make it more replicatable, and at least have a quality product sort of guaranteed if you do all the basics right. So how do you put that recipe together? And that for me, I thought was two articles that work really well together.
I think so too.
How to go with it and how to use it.
You can't go wrong here.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating, the depth, and I think the entire edition covers such various aspects that it's such an enjoyable read as well, that you learn the technical aspects, the final result, the celebrity status behind the beer.
The marketing aspect.
Yes. Something that I always feel very strong about, but nonetheless. So Craig, so a sour point for me is I'm not a big fan of sour beer.
Okay.
Right? But I see Marius touched on sour beer. He went on a sour safari.
Yeah.
Right? So tell us a bit more about this, because like I say, sour beer for me is something that my palate is still very, very young towards.
Well, I mean, so sour is... Okay, let's go back to basically the heritage behind it. It's not something that's come from nowhere. We've got the lambic beers, we've got the Cruiser, we've got established styles in Europe, and we talked earlier about your ingredients that's available to you, and how that influences what people drink in a particular region. I would say you get that almost everywhere. If you look at British beers, if you look at a bitter in Yorkshire with the type of food they eat, the type of yeast that they had available to them, the temperatures, and you look at the south in London, the beers taste different, even though they fall under the same style. There's subcategories, and it's a similar thing here. So what ends up happening is Marius takes us through the different types of sour. You've got different types of sour. Not everything that tastes sour is from the same thing. It overlaps actually with wine, and because of that, it's get complemented by the same sort of techniques that you might use to soften the sourness. Like barrel aging and things like that. So it's a very insightful article, because it made me also not a massive sour drinker. But to my admission, I mean, to be fair.
But I just want to add. I want to add as well. Marius Botha is the owner and brewer at Hazeldean Brewing.
Yeah, fantastic brewery.
And he's an award-winning sour beer producer. So just keep in mind. I just want to highlight that aspect of it as well.
We only have the best in the magazine, as you know.
Of course.
So we get the guys with the authority that actually understands what they're trying to achieve as well. And what's nice about this is it gives you that background as to what the different types of sour are. So you might try one and you might go, I don't like that one, but that one is this type of souring, kettle souring, whatever it might be. And this one's different. This one's aged. You might want a fresh one, you might want an aged one, you might want a really salty, soury one. We've seen some margarita beers on the market as well. But to be fair, it probably would complement what you eat, what you drink outside of beer, and it has got a little bit of a bridging the gap sort of power to people who might not be big lager drinkers, because remember, lager is still the big thing that people think beer is. Craft beer has other styles, and this is just a sub-style of craft beer. I'd say there's fantastic, famous breweries that you'd iconically travel to when you're in Belgium and in Germany. That this is what they do, and
that's a speciality.
And because it's well done, I feel if something is well done, it's always worth trying.
Of course, yes.
And you'd appreciate it, like a fine wine. I mean, you might not be a white wine drinker, you might be a red wine drinker. Put a nice Gewürztraminer in front of you.
Yeah. Different conversation.
If you judge it for what it is.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think it's definitely worth reading, because especially if somebody wants to know what it's all about, where to find it, what to try. It's a very good starting point. And you've got shops in the Cape, and you've got shops all over the country that stocks small amounts of selection
of those type of beers.
And that's worth trying.
But I'm still sour beer is still something that gets me.
Not to mention the beautiful packaging.
Yes, but don't get me wrong. I appreciate the good sour beer, but it's not something that I would drink often. is what I'm
Yeah, but
getting
you
at.
see,
But
that in itself is because you've got to approach it for what it is.
Yeah.
So, if you say you're a wine drinker, but you only really drink red wine, and you're not a wine drinker, you're a red wine drinker.
yeah.
So if you're drinking beer, but you're only really drinking lagers, it's the same thing. You're a lager drinker. I identify myself as an ale drinker in that sense, because I quite like a good ale.
Yeah.
Because it's massive. It could be almost anything. Everything's an ale.
So another article also that caught my eye was need some advice.
Yes.
I love the play on words actually. Well done, editor.
Well,
The layout of it as well is pretty sweet. So tell us a bit more about the style guide when it comes to advice.
So the style guide section, firstly, is where we try to take a style. We just talked about styles,
Yeah.
but try to explain what it is. I think Tim Godfrey, a fantastic bloke, was with SAB for a long time, Newland Spring for a long time.
Yeah.
The depth of knowledge he's got is just immense. And even on this article, he goes into the back of it and actually tells you a little bit about, the amount of sausages that you get with your breakfast advice and advice bush. So, in the culture behind it, and, to tell you a little bit more about the style, which is, I think, it's intricate to the story of any beer style. But talking about Weiss, what is Weiss? Is it wheat? Is it the Hefeweiss, which means the yeast? White beer. What are we talking about, and what's the different style? So that you've got a better idea when you go to the shop and you buy something, and the next time you buy something that says Weiss and it's not the same, why it's different? Because there might be completely different styles.
Of course, yes.
With a similar word, and that's the idea of the style study, is generally to educate us a little bit, go a little bit more in depth, and try to figure out, because you also get things like Witbier.
Yeah.
It's also a beer made with wheat.
I enjoy that actually.
Yeah, beautiful, with orange peel and coriander. So it depends on where you are.
Yeah.
Some of the sours you enjoy as well. It's also got coriander in it.
Yeah.
So it's.
But you see, you want to make an apology.
Yes, if you look at our contributors right at the beginning of this list, I think I was told it's very difficult to fit another one in. And
there are 11 contributors, by the way. Plus one.
So it's my apology to Tim that I did not put you on the list. But next time I'll make it a big picture.
Just for you.
Just for you.
So then, also, what other aspects do you think people should or will enjoy reading in the magazine as well? Can you just touch on some other aspects that aren't part of the features of the style guides or aspects like that?
Well, I think there's a lot of fun stuff in the magazine. We try to. There's a little bit for industry.
Yeah.
There's a little bit for lifestyle. So just touching on the Bomb Squad article is just really about what's happening with beer, and look at how interesting this is that other people are interested, not just us beer geeks.
Yeah.
And then we've got the mashup at the end, which I quite enjoy.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of famous faces. Spot one face there, you might remember him from the 90s, or Chesney Hawkes, which was fantastic. The one and only, so to speak.
Yeah.
I thought I'd just email him, because I know he likes a good beer, so I thought I remember years ago sitting at his dinner table, and he put I don't know, it was an ale with ginger added to it. From a friend of his at Dorset Brewery, I think it was Dorset Brewery, and I had this beer, and I thought, wow, that's quite amazing. But it's
like a full circle thing. Like years later,
you're
calling him up. Yeah,
that was. And I thought, well, I mean, who else can I contact? Now he's drinking somewhere else, but I think we've got a good place to go and find it and reconnect.
Of course, yes.
And then we've got a directory of breweries, and that directory is growing with every edition, with all of the places to go and look at. When you're in the area, beer tourism is my passion, to try to get people to the location.
Yes.
I think that's with the exception of a couple of them, the really good restaurants, that is where you get the best experience, the most knowledge about that specific beer from the staff working there. From quite often we're spoiled in beer because we have quite often the craft brewer at the facilities, whereas with wine you might have to pay quite a lot to have a tour with the winemaker.
With the wine.
With the beer guys, it's quite often you pay for a tasting $100.
He brings you the glass.
He brings you the glasses, washes them up, and pours you something from here and pours you something from there. And there's a couple of really cool characters. And I hope that we can bring some of those characters from beer out to the public through the magazine, so that when they know that they're in Franschhoek, go chat to Jan Schmidtball. I mean, you'll be drinking beer for the rest of your life, and vice versa.
I got caught up like that as well. Like, what's this beer story?
Exactly.
Well, here we are now.
You meet the right person, you start actually exploring the depth of it.
Yeah.
And you realize that beer is actually, it's a conversation starter. It's something that you can have. And for me, I like variety. I feel like craft beer is like vintage car collecting without the capital outlay.
Yes.
So I can have a fridge with variety.
To a certain extent.
Well, it depends on what you buy.
Yeah. But I just wanted to close off as well, is also we look at, as much as we look at the broader aspect of beer, a thing that I still enjoy reading is about the homebrewing, the growth of homebrewing clubs, which you can also follow in the magazine.
Yes.
But also specifically Anelda for sure, right?
Yes.
I met her at Fools for the first time.
It's the first time.
We've been following her, and it's amazing to see her growth as well. Having been in the nail industry for how many? 20 years? 20 years? Being a nail tech, and then now brewing beer with her husband, it's like, that's pretty cool as well.
And she's a rookie. So
Yeah.
within Full, she sort of, I think, entered with the ambition of perhaps winning the best rookie. That's certainly the conversations I had with her the last couple of years. But then she ends up, taking second place.
And I was sitting right next to her.
And I'm
That
thinking,
freaked me out so much.
We've got her in the magazine.
Yeah.
It's almost like preemptively. Yeah, wow, that was really good editorial.
Top guy.
No, but at the end of the day, it's nice. The homebrew
Yeah.
scene is growing, and with competitions, I mean, there's a lot of homebrew activity. It's not just in the Western Cape,
Yeah.
but with Fools of Fans, what we seem to have managed to do there is to pull together. I think the first competition there was 6 clubs.
Six?
And now it's 16. So
And over 100 beers now.
3 years in, 16 to go from 6 to 16 is quite good. There's a lot of beers, but we're talking about the clubs, just
Yeah.
the entries. That's organised units of people that's expanding knowledge on beer. They're like little soldiers that go out and tell people about craft beer.
Best people.
And that's, there's a template for that. In
Yeah.
America, there's a certain amount of craft breweries supported by a certain amount of a homebrew community.
Okay.
Because the homebrew community is actually, it's this hidden wave underneath it. It's all of their friends and family being subjected to try this.
You will
try that. So it's an important way of how we've developed the industry in some ways. And
That's irony, is that I've had so many people here in this cave as well, like, try this. Have you tried this? Yeah.
Because it's very much our identity. And you identify as, you don't like sour, for argument's sake.
Yeah.
Some people identify whether they really like sour, but is it kettle sour or is it the other way?
Yeah.
Is it mixed fermentation? Are you adding fruit to get it? Are you letting it sour before? So there's an element of that I think it's a very personalized experience. Some people are IPA drinkers, some people don't like the IPA.
You talk about that. I've experienced the same thing. People always ask me, what beer should I have? And I tell them, I can't answer that question.
But try this.
Try this. Try that. There are so many to try. And I will never tell somebody, oh, you must. I'll recommend a beer, but
you can always say, I love this one.
Yeah, for me, I love it. You might hate it. So, with all means. But, Craig, thank you again for making the journey across the bay to come and sit here with me.
I look across the bay often. I think, I wonder what bay
you can take a swim.
I wave a lot.
You can swim. The sun was quite nice this morning, actually. But thank you again for coming to sit down with me and talking.
Always a pleasure.
Talk on tap. And I hope that everybody gets to read this edition as well. Make a point of it. And I'm looking forward to what the future holds in beer as well. Yes. So, with that said, thank you again. And I hope that we can make this grow exponentially, that everybody gets to enjoy beer. So, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, Craig was here.